Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Meepolis and this is Literally Graphic. And today I'm checking in on my 2020 reading goals, and while this year is certainly turning out vastly different than I expected, I feel like my reading goals is actually one of the places that I've easily been able to just keep on keeping on. So here we go. Reviewing my initial 2020 reading goals video, I, surprisingly, had not forgotten anything and really did just want to read 30 books from the so-called Caribbean, South, and Central Americas, plus diaspora, as always. TLDR, I've read 12 of those books so far, so a bit behind, but since I only ever read 15 books last year towards my 30 books without pictures goal, much better. In particular, as a result of the Caribathon, I've really felt energized to devour 18 more books from the islands ASAP. Digging into a bit more detail, I did manage to start off the year pretty well with Ingrid Rojas Contreras' Fruit of the Drunken Tree, which I rated 4 out of 5 stars, an own-voice novel that follows two women of different class experiences whose lives cross as they are coming of age in 1990s Colombia. Next up was the much more disappointing 2-star read, The Japanese Lover, and while I still generally think people can write whatever they want, I felt like this was a good example of how boring telling other people's stories can be. My third read, The Line Becomes a River, Dispatches from the Border, is probably my most controversial read of the year. A memoir by a former ICE agent. I certainly don't think everyone needs to read this, but it does highlight the evils and inherent inhumanity of this institution. Pre-Trump, unless my memory is really failing me fairly well, and there's certainly some people who will find this very enlightening. I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. Next up, in the Dreamhouse, a memoir, was an extremely daring and creative book, both in its execution, but also in its subject matter, digging into the nuance of same-sex relationships. Machado shares her experience with abuse in a lesbian relationship via non-linear storytelling and classic horror tropes. I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars. And after innumerable volumes of lovely complex, I finally got around to reading I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, which I did feel had its strong points, but also had some pretty strong drawbacks that settled me at 2 out of 5 stars. Next up, I tackled Infinity Sun by Adam Silvera. Definitely more than a little awkward talking about social justice in a fantasy setting. If you're more into young adults, you might enjoy it a bit more, but I ended up rating it 2 out of 5 stars. But then I decided to read more Nalo Hopkinson and refound life with The Salt Road, which I ended up rating 4 out of 5 stars. The Salt Road transports readers across centuries and civilizations as it fearlessly explores the relationships women have with their lovers, their people, and the divine. And then I finally got a second chance to finish Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which I mostly read in 2019, but then had to return. It was more than a little interesting, although I think I would like to read it again before rating it. And then we hit Caribathon, which, as I said, has put a lot of very interesting books in front of me. Of course, I had to kick things off with another Nalo Hopkinson book, this time Falling in Love with Hominids, a short story collection. I ended up rating this 5 out of 5 stars, which is pretty unusual for me, as I find most short story collections to be a mixed bag. Next up, I tackled Unburnable by Marie-Hélène John, which was quite interesting and exciting to read. It's a debut novel, and I have initially rated it also 5 out of 5 stars. Sadly, I then tried to read The Mimic Men by V.S. Nepal, which, while it proved to be fairly interesting, and there's probably some stuff that went over my head, it centered such a detached and unlikable character that it was just too much. Although I did finish it, I rated it 2 out of 5 stars. And that's all they wrote. Bye, y'all. Keep reading and resist white supremacy. And as always, Literally Graphic is recorded on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and Anishinaabe people, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat Nation. I live here because of British colonization, indigenous genocide, and more geographically specific, Treaty 13. also known as the Toronto Purchase, which was finalized in 1805 between representatives of the Crown and certain Mississauga peoples. This treaty was a lie and has since been broken many times over. Saying so reflects only my own small steps towards knowing the truth and does nothing for reconciliation.